Alrighty, so here in week 5, we are 1 week away from our first code review. So my plan for today is I'm just going to give you a brief look at the schedule and just talk about how it's laid out. But just know that my plan is to release this schedule so that you can start signing up on February 7th. Okay, so let's just briefly look at it. It's a Google Doc. And what it is because I have both classes this semester. This is your side of the sheet. And what this shows is that this part of the schedule, these dates, are before the due date. And these are after. So what you can know is that you need to, you can sign up for, and this is over here, a review session or an assistance session. Really, you can do that anywhere in here. And then what you will do is come in for assistance or review. And then if you come in for review during this time and we find something in your code, then what you can do is update that before the due date. And then after the due date, what will happen is you'll need to submit your code by that night. And then you'll have this much time, and you can see this stretch and the times and the days to actually come in for your code review. The key is you can't change your code that you've submitted here at that point. Okay, so they are done over Zoom, and I've given kind of some 6 guidelines just to help you kind of understand this process. If you do come in for an assistance, you still need to come in for review. Here's the Zoom link and information. Okay, so what I will do, as I said before, is I'm going to release this schedule. My intention is actually to do 2 things. I'm going to release it, if you're not on Discord, I'm going to release it in this discussion. Like if you get here before the 7th, you'll want to come back and check it on the 7th. I suspect people will start signing up because they know what time is best for them. Okay, so I will again release this here and out on Discord. All right. So, oh, and one final thing is if this doesn't work for you, the sooner you reach out to me, we can work something out. I'll do my best to work with students on that. Okay, so for week 5, you have your last 2 days before your dev. And day 6 is kind of interesting. I think of day 6 as like calisthenics, because she has you go to this Reborg site and program a robot. And it's really fun, but it's also calisthenics. The final project is pretty challenging, I have to say, even though once you see the code, it seems really logical. I remember struggling a bit, even for myself. So here's what I would say on the final project here. Give it your best shot, right? I mean, because you're doing calisthenics. Try to do that. And then on day 7, gosh, let's see. I got to go remember day 7. Oh, yeah, day 7 was fun. I just have to remember. Okay, let me go back and look. Day 7. What was day 7? Hangman. Yeah, totally fun. Right? Now, this is a great thing to go through. Sorry, I just needed to see the files to remember. But this is a really good exercise to do before we get to Dev 1. So think of it that way, right? So again, I actually probably 7. I forgot it for a moment. It's probably one of my most fun days. Okay, so git ignore. Okay, so moving on from that, nothing new about that. Do make sure your code is PEP8. I do check it. I pull it into my system. So, you got to get used to that if a few of you are still struggling with that as of this recording. Owen, I want to give him a shout out. He posted out on Discord about adding this to your git ignore file. I definitely like this because if you're using ASCII art, which I will talk about in a minute, that you can have that directory that gets created just ignored and not pushed to GitHub, which would make the most sense because you don't need it on GitHub because it'll be recreated every time you run. So he shows how to do that. So I did that today and it was great. One of the ways you know that works is, and here's mine, is that it grays out. And what that means is GitHub is going to not push it and not track it. Okay. All right. So now let's look at my code for dev 0. But before we do that, let's actually go look at dev 0 because I made a few changes today from the last time I just did a quick overview with you all. Again, I apologize, this falls on Valentine's Day. It was not my intention. But again, you don't have to do this on Valentine's Day because you can do this before. Okay, one thing I changed is instead of validating user input, I just put user input because that threw a lot of students off last time, but I did it in my code because I think it's important to show that as well. Uses the PEP8, nothing there, flow control, list, loops and list. You need to update list with code, some type of reporting. Okay. I do not recommend third-party libraries, but if you're like, if this is the project you want to do and it needs it, I do require virtualization. I do have a video on that, so make sure you ask me or I'll go find it and post it here. Functions, even though we've kind of covered them, are optional. And honestly, I found it a good challenge for me to actually write this code that you're going to see without them. Although, man, it was long. Okay, and then the last thing is if you're gonna, if should be the use of ASCII art's fine, you need to import it, and therefore it does not have to be PEP8 compliant. Okay, all right. So let me switch over, and I wrote just a little, and you'll need to do this too for yours. You'll need to do a flow chart. No, actually, do I require a flow chart? I think a flowchart is actually a really good idea. I think being able to, I think I ended up doing this on the next dev. So maybe what I'll do here is I'm going to suggest to you, you do create a flowchart. Let me just show you what mine looks like if I render it, right? So I did a little description of what it was. I talked about the menu. I talked about what each option did, and then I did a little flowchart. And I just think that flowchart was helpful to help you lay out your process and your algorithm of how you're going to handle it. Okay, so I don't know, I guess I'm saying it's optional on this one, but on the next one it will be required. All right, so let me go ahead and just run mine so you can see it. So the first thing that happens is you can see I have some ASCII art. That's from the other run that I did. And that one really key here is that I generated random. So what this is for charging, tracking the charging sessions, the cost of every time I charged my EV, and I wanted to know my total cost. So first what I did is just to have some data to play with is I generated some random data. And then what I did is I gave the user the option to review the charging data. So like if I reviewed it now, I could see, and I broke it down by home. That's how much, and I could have put a $sign in there. The number of times home charging was done, the number of times supercharging was done. So it was kind of nice just to have a little data to play with. But then if the user actually goes in and says, I want to enter, right, enter more charging data. The first one is how many miles. So let's say it's 200 miles, like how many miles in the battery. So this is the key, is it wants to know how many miles, because that will help it determine what's the max we're going to go to. And then the charge limit is set. The charging to this limit will add 200 miles or 70 miles. And the question is, do you want to change the charging limit, or do you want to actually charge? And I'll say, yeah, charge it. And then the last last question is your location. So I'm going to say home charging. Oh, look at that. I have an error. Oh, isn't that cool? Huh, I just ran this code. Oh, I think I know why. Okay, that's always fun. Okay, let me just take a minute here and figure it out. Well, that was fun. Here's where the error is, so I'll go over it and tell you how I fixed it. Okay, so my code starts with setting some global variables. Now, again, like I've said before, try to limit the amount of global variables that you're using. Over time, you'll want to do that. And so I set, and by the way, the other practice is to use all caps for your constants. In this case, it is also a good practice. And I take the miles and then I multiply it out times 90%. It's just some stuff. Anyway, here's my actual creating those sessions. And I just set up my EV cost. I do a range of 1 to 50. And then I go through and I say for each in range of 1 to however many entries randomly got selected. Then I go through and select a random location. And then if it's this location, I do a random cost because this is kind of the barriers of my cost. And then random cost. Oh yeah, so because home charging is cheaper than supercharging, so I set a different range there. And then I appended it into this list. And then I just gave a message out. So then what I did is here's my while logic that's running, asking the user for their options. I set a Boolean to control that. And then I ask for the user input. What do they want to do? Here are the 3 options I talked about before. Valid input. I do validate the input. What that means is I'm just making sure the user gave me what I wanted. And if while not valid input, and I set it to false, so this is going to run once, but it'll check that test. And if not, it'll run it again. And that's where I ask for miles. And then I have an additional nested while here to ask for the next one, which is the input. Here it is. So miles and battery comes back from asking the user how many miles we're going to put in the battery. And then while not charging, while it's not set to that limit, then it does some output, and then it asks for if you want to start or not. And the way I handle validation, there's a couple ways, but typically I can do it with an in. So while user charge answer, whatever that answer was, is not a Y or a yes. Now I could have also, and I probably should, actually just put the capitalized version so that the user does either. It works. And then I do a lowercase, that's how I handle it. I put a lowercase on that input. And then if it's no, then I just go and determine the miles to charge. If it's yes, else I just set these to booleans. Okay. And then while it's a valid location, meaning they entered the correct one, while it's not, so I'm setting these before I ask the user. And then I'm asking for, and by the way, this is where it bombed because I had forgotten. I don't know why I missed this, but it happens. And if charge location not in, uppercase H, uppercase S, lower, and that's really I think a nice way to do it. Not in, meaning it's not one of these, okay? And then it prints out, right? Else it actually asks for, or else we're actually going to now determine the cost, which is why it bombed, because when it tried to print out cost here in a minute, it's like, and by the way, you can see my something went wrong, right? Something didn't work message, and that's what happened there. Not a graceful exit, but an exit nonetheless. And then this is the line that it bombed on. But then I append into the cost and I set the validation as true. So this while loop ends, which takes us back. And then if the user has the second option, I set some variables for the cost and then the cost and the charges. And then for each entry in the EV cost, that list I set up, and I knew based on the way I had pushed the values in to that the first position was the location, right? And then I determined those, and this is where I was keeping count of how many, right? So I kept count of how many, and I also did a plus equal. This is my total where I was accumulating the total. Now I could have used some here, but I decided to go all in. Okay, so then I did some printouts and I said no, stop the program, and then I printed some ASCII art. Okay, so does yours have to look like this? Absolutely not, and it should not. I'm just telling you what I did and how I approached it. I think the best approach, and some of you might want to do something that's more along the lines of, you know, like a game that you've seen. You can do that too. The thing there is you just need to make sure you're writing your own code, okay? Because it is very tempting and to go out and look at somebody else's code, but you lose the benefit of this by doing that, because the goal of this is for you to write code based on your own concepts, okay, your own ideas. And maybe what you're doing is taking something and modifying it, right? Come talk to me, by the way. If you're in question about this, come talk to me. So the final thing I say is that, you know, it does need to be in a dev, and I'll have to just show you this rather than talk about it. So it's in your private at the same level as 100 days. It's in first, we'll end up creating 3 of these directories, so dev 0, and then you'll want to have a README file in there with a short description of the code. Again, I'm going to make this optional, and then your main.py, and then any ASCII art that you might be using. Okay, I hope this gives you an understanding, or at least approach for how you want to think about and approach dev 0. And I think this is it. Let me go back. Yeah, my code, I did the other. I hope this is helpful to you. Please let me know in the reply here if you have any questions about this. Remember, I will release the code review schedule on February 7th. All right, see you later.